Chapter 5. 10 minutes later, although I wouldn't have believed it possible, the turbulence got worse. Now it felt as if we were in a snow globe that someone just shook and shook and shook. The lurching turned into deep plunges that made me feel like we were nosediving before we finally came back up, all the while bumping. One huge thump sent all the oxygen masks tumbling down, where they swayed from side to side. Mine swung right in front of my face. Oh my God, was I supposed to put it on? A glance up front showed neither Larry nor Max had donned a mask. I couldn't very well ignore mine, so I tied a big loop in it, just to get the thing out of my face. Another huge thump popped open a few of the overhead bins. All of a sudden, a quick barrage of soft but forceful punches pummeled my head and shoulders, but the assault was over before I could even shriek or fend them off. Oranges from the bin above my head. One landed in my lap, and others lay all around me, rolling up and down the aisle with every shift of the plane. I wanted to scream, but held it in. Panicking wouldn't anyone help. Panicking wouldn't help anyone, especially not the pilots. Again, I tried to see what they were doing, their demeanor, their attitude. Were they worried? Struggling with the controls? It was impossible to tell from my vantage point. I felt an overwhelming need for reassurance, for someone to tell me everything would be okay, that I would be okay, but no one did. We bounced around, tears started sliding down my face. I stopped myself and wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. You baby. There was no need to cry over a little turbulence. Tons of things are worse than this. And then there was a hush. Not totally quiet, but there was less of a drone than there had been. I leaned over and peered out the window at the starboard engine. At the end of the wing, a blue light winked. Usually the propellers were nearly invisible in flight because they were turning so rapidly. But as lightning flashed, I could very clearly see the propeller circling slowly, turning only with the movement of the plane. That engine had stopped. Chapter 6. Both trembling hands covered my mouth as I stifled a cry or a scream or whatever was making its way up. Two words whispered their way out. Oh, God. I wanted my mom or my dad or AJ or someone. I didn't want to be on that plane. There was only one way to know the seriousness of the situation. I would have to watch the cockpit, see what they were doing. Wiping my eyes on my sleeve, I prayed. God, please, please, please let everything be okay. Please don't let us crash, and please just let me get to midway. Please let them be calm when I look up there. I leaned out into the aisle. From the back, the two pilots looked to be doing what they always did, sitting tight, focusing on the controls. The loss of an engine had to freak them out too, right? Maybe I'd imagined it. I didn't know about anything about planes, did I? Maybe the engine was fine. Again, I stared out the window at the propeller. Definitely not turning. Any idiot could see that the Rolls-Royce had quit. But if Larry wasn't announcing anything about the engine, what else wasn't he telling me? Or was it not a big deal? Airplanes lose engines all the time, right? I knew I'd read that somewhere. That's why they load only 3,800 pounds in the G1, so that one engine can still fly the plane. Only a few months ago, my dad was on a flight when the G1 lost an engine an hour after leaving Honolulu, and they just turned around, no problem. After all, pilots are trained for bad stuff to happen, and maybe this wasn't even that bad. Maybe we were so close to midway that they were already starting to think about landing, so why worry me with details about a stupid engine? That had to be it. We bounced again, hard. Beneath my butt, something in the frame of my seat gave way. My eyes squeezed shut. Someone tell me it's going to be okay, please. How long could the plane handle getting beat to death like this? The engine was probably the first thing to go. Then a wing, the tail, or some other vital thing that we need to land. Larry just didn't want to share the bad news. I opened my eyes again and watched for some movement from the cockpit. Max got up. Bracing himself against the sides, he managed to make it as far as the galley. Was he getting more coffee? Things couldn't be that bad if he was getting more coffee. But no, he wasn't getting coffee. From underneath the bottom of the galley shelves, he pulled something out and tossed it down the aisle in front of him. The cabin was still dark, and I couldn't see what it was. With a foot, he pushed it along as he walked until he reached me. Now I wanted to scream. It was a yellow raft, an emergency raft, but we would only need that if... Max reached beneath the seat, yanked out a flotation device, and shoved it in my lap. Then he uttered the first words I'd heard him speak. Those words weren't, "Everything's okay," or "You'll be okay. We'll be landing at Midway soon." Instead, they were the worst words I'd ever heard. "We lost an engine and the hydraulics are acting up. We can't get out of the storm. Larry is going to ditch the plane while he can still control it." He nodded at the flotation device in my lap. "Put it on." Chapter 7. My limbs froze and my heart pounded in my ears as I watched Max struggle to get back to the cockpit. The flotation device was still in my lap, but I didn't even try to put it on. I couldn't make myself look at it. None of this was real, none of it. Everything was fuzzy and dull. None of it could possibly be real. The G1 bounced all over. Then we went into a dive, so steep my belly strained against the seatbelt. I couldn't do anything but hold my hands over my face and scream into them. I didn't see Max coming until he was right there. With one hand, he held onto the seat across the aisle. With the other, he grabbed my shoulder and shook hard until I stopped screaming. His face was inches from mine and his eyes narrowed. "Listen to me. If you want to get out of here, you have to listen." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't do anything but listen. His breath smelled of coffee as he continued to yell at me face to face. "The G1 should stay on the surface for about 5 minutes. If we stand any chance at all, we have got to get the raft out the window exit, then inflate it. You can't inflate it before it goes out the window. Understand?" He was so close. It seemed like I absorbed his words through my face, not my ears. I couldn't do anything but look at him. Leaning back a little, he grimaced and then yelled, "Do you understand?" A few flecks of spit landed on my face. I just sat there. He slapped me. Shocked out of my paralysis, I set a hand on my cheek and nodded like a maniac. 5 more minutes and we're down. Get your life vest on. Get ready to exit. We've got to be fast, or... He hesitated and then finished his sentence. "Or we'll go down with the plane, understand?" Again I nodded, even though I only wanted to scream. Max stumbled back to the cockpit. I wanted so badly to hear what was worse than this. I needed to know what was worse. There had to be something worse. Didn't there? My hand shook so bad I just sat there, cradling the one thing that might save my life. The one thing that would do absolutely no good if I didn't get it on in time. Things suddenly got quieter. Then there were new sounds, shudders and squeaks, and an anguished mechanical groan like something out of a horror movie. Max barreled down the aisle toward me. With a loud grunt, ripped the exit window open. The wind and rain burst in and would have nearly blown me away if I hadn't been strapped in. But in one motion, Max clicked open my seatbelt, gripped me under the armpits, and picked me up like a small child, wobbling as the plane jostled as he stepped to the opening. The wind whistled and the rain pelted my face. Putting up my hands to protect myself, I shouted, "My life vest!" He just tightened his grip on me and screamed back, "Hold your breath and kick for the surface. The raft will be there." And he threw me out the window. Chapter 8. The life vest was ripped from my arms as I zoomed through the air. The blast of wind and rain took my breath away, so the scream coming up from my gut stopped dead. The falling lasted forever, my arms windmilling in the void. I wanted to stop moving. Stop the noise. Stop the wet. Stop the cold. Stop the blowing. Stop everything. Stop. Please. But if I stopped, it meant I was dead. Dying wasn't what I wanted. Breathing was. I just wanted to breathe and live. Chapter 9. My feet hurt when they hit the cold water, and I sank, feeling like I would never stop. Salt water poured in my open mouth as I screamed at the darkness swallowing me. I could see only black, could feel only the shock of cold and wet as I fell farther into the crushing nothing. Am I dying? Because if this was it, my last moments on earth, I just wanted it to be over. God, please kill me already. This is more than I can take. Chapter 10. And I floated down, down, down. It was over. I was over. Dying was so much easier than I ever thought. Chapter 11. It turned out dying was too easy. Something in me wouldn't accept the easy way out. My arms flailed and my legs kicked, and after a moment stopped my descent. My legs kicked more and helped me move through toward the surface. My eyes were open, and through the blur above me, reddish lights glowed. As I reached up in my arms, my air went, my panic grew, and I struggled to hang on. I struggled not to lose my mind. I struggled as if my life depended on it because I was certain that it did. God, please let me reach the light. I want to live. Fighting with every kick, every ounce of reserve I had left, the light got brighter, closer, and I reached up, planning to burst out into the air, but I couldn't. I was at the surface. I knew I was. But my hands touched a barrier. Something was there, soft and yielding, but I couldn't push through. The red was all around it. I was so close, but something kept me from air, from life, from not dying. In an airless, thoughtless frenzy, my legs kept kicking as my hands pounded, pushed, and slapped. My head whipped from side to side as I screamed a silent no, no, no.